In this video, we're going to find percents given an amount and a whole. So write the corresponding scenario as a ratio of an amount multiplicatively compared to a whole. Then write the corresponding percent. Round any percents to 2 decimal places as needed. So let's get a highlighter ready. We're going to highlight our given information in yellow. Chanel is driving to Washington on a 20-hour road trip. So far, she has driven for 8 hours. Here comes the question, so I'm going to get green for our goal. What percent of the hours has Chanel already driven? So notice first we're asked to write the corresponding ratio for this situation, including units in your ratio. And we're told to write the ratio as an amount over a whole. So the first question is, which is the amount and which is the whole? Okay. So one way to determine what the whole is to look at your question. So it says, what percent of the hours has Chanel already driven? So the amount she's already driven is going to be our amount, and our whole is going to be the total hours of the trip. Okay, so this is what we're comparing. Okay, so usually the whole is followed by of the, so here we have percent of the hours, and of the hours in this case is referring to all the hours of the trip. And then you usually have a statement that's referring to the amount. So Chanel already driven, so that's the amount she's already driven multiplicatively compared to the total number of hours. Okay, so we'll be talking about this idea throughout all these videos. So the amount was 8 hours that she's already driven out of a total of 20 hours. Okay, notice they're both hours, so I'll just write this as 8 over 20. Now we're asked to write the percent that corresponds to this ratio. So she's completed 8/20ths of her trip. What is that out of 100? And then we'll write that as a percent. So for most of these calculations, we'll just be using the calculator. So to change a fraction to a percent, multiply the fraction or ratio by 100%. Now remember, my percent sign stays with me. That's the unit. It means out of 100 per 100. So I'm going to take 8, divide by 20, and then multiply that by 100. And I have 40. So we have 40%. Write your answer as a complete sentence. So Chanel has driven 40% of the hours of the trip. Now we're asked, what percent of the trip remains? Explain. Okay, so 20 hours is the total trip. She has another 12 hours to go. And we could find the ratio of 12 to 20 and rewrite that as a percent. But I want you to think of this in terms of 100% is the whole. So if she's driven 40%, that means she needs to drive the entire trip minus what she's already driven, and 100% minus 40% is 60%. Okay, so you can subtract percents like this. Remember, 100% means 100 out of 100. 40% means 40 out of 100. To subtract fractions, we subtract the numerators, keep the denominator, and 60 over 100 is equivalent to 60%. Okay, so the two parts, what she's driven and not driven, add up to the total trip. Let's look at the next one. Christian bought a $60 sweater. The tax on the sweater was $4.95 for a total cost of $64.95. Then we're asked, what percent of the cost of the sweater was tax. Okay. So now we need to write this ratio of the amount compared to the whole. Okay. So we're asked what percent of the cost of the sweater. So the cost of the sweater is our whole, because we have percent of the cost of the sweater. So again, it tells you the whole by stating percent and then of the. Okay. And notice it didn't say the total cost, so we don't want to look at $64.95. We're going to look at the $60. Okay, that's going to be our whole. So let's write $60. And then it says was the tax. So the tax is the amount we're comparing to the cost of the sweater. And the tax was $4.95. So we have $4.95 out of 60. Okay. Now, don't worry, we have decimals and fractions, but we're actually going to leave it in this form because we're going to rewrite it as a percent. We're not going to simplify this or write it as a fraction without decimals. This is just to prepare us to write it as a percent. So the percent will be 4.95 over 60. We change this to a percent by multiplying by 100%. So let's put this over here. 4.95. We'll divide by 60. Press equals. Multiply by 100. And we get 8.25%. Write your answer as a complete sentence. Okay, so what percent of the cost of the sweater was the tax? So the tax was 8.25% of the cost of the sweater. Let's look at the next part. What is the ratio and percent of the total cost including tax to the cost of the sweater? Include units in your ratio. Okay, and I'm noticing I didn't include units in this ratio. They were both dollars. I should follow directions better. Okay, but we will this time. So now, let me get the highlighter. Ratio and percent of the total cost including tax to the cost of the sweater. So the total cost including tax to the cost of the sweater. So it's a ratio of the total to the cost without tax. So we have $64.95 over the cost of the sweater. Okay. So notice the different language we use. When we use the ratio to language, the first number is the numerator, the second is the denominator. Okay, but frequently when you use what percent of the percent of the is referring to the value in the denominator first, and then it follows with the part that goes in the numerator, the amount. Okay, now let's write this as a percent. So we're going to take this ratio and multiply by 100%. Okay. We're going to use the calculator. So let's divide 64.95 divided by 60, which gives us this, times 100, and we get 100.825%. Okay, so looking at this number, so the total cost of the sweater is 108.25% of the cost of the sweater. So how does this compare to the percent of tax? What relationship do you notice? Remember the tax we found was 8.25%. So to find the total amount of the sweater, it's the cost of the sweater plus the cost of the tax gives us the total cost. So this was the sweater cost. Okay, Okay, so we paid 100% of the sweater cost. We paid 8.25% of the sweater cost in tax, and this gives us the total cost. Okay. Now remember, percentages are always referring to a percent of something. Okay, so if we wanted to find the total cost from the get-go, we could multiply the 60, find 108.25% of the 60 by multiplying an equivalent fraction or decimal. Okay, but this shows us that the total amount is a sum of the cost amount plus the cost percent plus the tax percent. Let's look at one more. Carol went shopping for a cell phone. The price was listed as $400. She had a coupon for $50 off. Now here comes our question. What percent of the original price is the coupon savings amount? Okay, so what's our amount in our whole? So what percent of the original price, so that's going to be our whole, and the original price was $400, and then it's followed by is the coupon savings amount, which was $50. So we want to find 50 is what percent of 400. So now to find this percent, we can multiply the ratio by 100%. These were also dollars to begin with. So I'm going to take 50, divide by 400, get the result, multiply by 100, and I have 12.5%. Now write your answer as a complete sentence. So, the coupon savings amount is 12.5% of the original price. Let's look at the last part. What is the ratio and percent of the reduced cost of the phone to the original cost of the phone? Okay, now again we have this to language, reduced cost to the original cost. Okay, so that means this value is our numerator. So the reduced cost of the phone, well, if she saved $50 from 400, the reduced is 400 minus 50, which is $350, over the original cost of the phone, which is 400. Now let's find this as a percent by taking this ratio and multiplying by 100%. 350 divided by 400 is this, times 100, gives us 87.5%. And then we're asked, how does this percent compare to the percent of the coupon? What relationship do you notice? Okay. So notice we found that the coupon was 12.5% of the original price. Okay. And the price that the reduced cost of the phone is 87.5% of the original price. Well, notice combining these two amounts, we get a total of 100%. Okay. So 100% minus the percent of the coupon savings gives us the reduced price of the phone. Okay, so this was original price minus savings equals reduced price.